Freaks unite everywhere. My name is Justin Fensterman, and welcome to another episode of Hoops Freak Fensty. We're going back in time to talk about a great time of the NBA, the 1990s, the era that caused the league to explode. And there are a lot of teams and players that get credit for that. Make sure you catch previous Hoops Freak Fensties from the stories from the 90s. Make sure you catch them on our channel here, Hoops Freak Fensty on YouTube, talking Magic, talking everything from Sonics, talking everything from Knicks Pacers, all those great rivalries. That's where we're talking about them. So we can have an amazing memory and go down memory lane when it comes to the NBA. Today's Hoops Freak Fensty, Houston Rockets. Somewhere in the middle during the Chicago Bulls dominance of the 1990s, there's this team in Houston led by Hakeem, who became Hakeem Olajuwon. Same draft, by the way, as Michael Jordan, 1984 NBA draft. Everybody talks about Michael Jordan, third pick, Sam Bowie, second pick. Oh, my God. Who was the first pick in that draft? The Dream Shake. That's right, Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest centers of all time. And when you look at the 1990s, I'll say this, taking 1990 to 2000 into account, Hakeem Olajuwon and maybe Shaquille O'Neal, those are your top two right there at the mountaintop. But Hakeem gets a lot of credit, and they actually, Hakeem and Shaq, meet up in the NBA playoffs. Talking about a lot of these teams, whether it's an expansion team that started from nothing, became something, the Houston Rockets were always in the thick of it. You go back to the 1980s. They actually made two finals appearances in the 1980s. 1981 that they made with a sub 500 record. It was nuts. They lose to Boston. And then in 1986, after Hakeem Olajuwon was drafted, they go back to the finals. Now, back then, they not only had Olajuwon, we know him as this amazing center, one of the best of all time, right? His career started as a power forward. Blows your mind, right? Ralph Sampson, 7'4", was the first overall pick in the 1983 NBA draft. Houston took him, and then they get Olajuwon the next year, converting Olajuwon to power forward, and you had for a few years the deadly twin towers of the NBA in Houston. They go to the finals. They lose against arguably the greatest Boston Celtics team of the 80s. And it just showed that even though this Houston Rockets team was on the younger side, size matters, and Houston was able to still get past the Los Angeles Lakers in one of the greatest, most random plays we ever saw in Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals. Hakeem Olajuwon ejected from the game earlier. Ralph Sampson gets the ball with a second to go and just flips it up to the basket, and it hits, sending the Rockets to the championship, pulling an upset over the Los Angeles Lakers. And back then, Lakers-Celtics was all the rage, and the Rockets end up disrupting that. Ralph Sampson gets into a little bit of feud with Coach Bill Fitch at the time, also suffering injuries that he didn't handle properly, came back too soon. He would always admit that years later. And then he gets traded to the Golden State Warriors for Joe Barry Carroll, who was an all-star, nice big man there, and Eric Sleepy Floyd, another all-star who can help run the point. But that was the end of the Twin Towers in late 1987. Sampson off to the Golden State Warriors. So now, as we're watching this Houston team still hang in the thick of it as we're heading towards the 90s, Don Chaney becomes head coach, known for his defense. But the problem with the Rockets in the late 80s, despite having Olajuwon, they always got eliminated after they made the finals for the rest of the decade in the first or second round, could not make it over the hump. Now, despite not being able to make it to the conference finals, they still acquired some good pieces. They acquire, leading up to the beginning of the 90s, Otis Thorpe. I mentioned Sleepy Floyd, but Otis Thorpe, now a good foil for Hakeem Olajuwon, a double-double guy that can help Olajuwon out in the post, and was a major fan favorite among the Houston fan base. They end up getting him. They trade for Kenny Smith in 1990, and we all know with what Kenny Smith can do off the court with how great of an analyst he is with Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley, Shaq, and all that. But Kenny Smith was quite a player, quite a contender, a champion, and a solid three-point shooter. They end up getting him to add to their arsenal. Somebody else they end up getting, Vernon Maxwell, another good shooter who could get steals. That was the thing with Houston. They had a lot of good shooters. They're bigs in the middle, but they had guys that were solid defenders. And when you're looking at the early 90s Rockets, you see that growth. You absolutely see that growth. But unfortunately, the decade didn't start off right for Houston because Houston had a major problem getting past the Lakers in the playoffs. They couldn't do it in 1990. They couldn't do it in 1991. Hakeem becoming more religious. And just to give a word about that, he was a different player after discovering religion and the Muslim faith, because early on in his career, he got teed up a lot. He got into fights and altercations in big moments too. I mentioned that issue from the Western Conference Finals in the critical 1986 Game 5. I mentioned that. He got ejected from that. When he discovered his faith, he chilled out. He was more mellow. He focused more on what's going on the court, getting rid of the noise that was right next to him. So Hakeem Olajuwon going through a personal transformation, and also during that year of 90-91 suffering a big-time eye injury, in which, for those that remember, while he was becoming Hakeem from Hakeem, he was also wearing the, I don't want to say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar style goggles, but more the Bo Outlaw style goggles, more thinner framed, but he was going through a few eyewear in order to protect his face. So unfortunately, because of that, that season was kind of a wash there. But Don Chaney wins Coach of the Year because this team becomes one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. The following year, you're thinking that they're going to thrive off that, right? The answer is no. There were a lot of problems back then. Number one problem being Hakeem Olajuwon, like a lot of players back then, even Scottie Pippen, they'd sign these ridiculous contracts for a bunch of years, but they weren't allowed to renegotiate. And we saw that change in the NBA. They weren't allowed to renegotiate. And because of that, they were stuck making what's considered for the top players in the league kind of peanuts. We're talking about $3 to $4 million, and that's it. And that pissed him the hell off in the 91-92 season. The team makes no playoff run whatsoever, misses the playoffs for the first time in years, despite having a 42-40 record. Otis Thorpe joins Hakeem Olajuwon on the All-Star squad, which is great for the team. However, towards the end of that season, Hakeem Olajuwon suffered a hamstring injury. Now, was it a hamstring injury or a hamstring injury? Because the Rockets management, in light of what was going on between the organization and Hakeem Olajuwon, he wanted a new contract. He wanted a contract extension, and management accused Olajuwon of faking the hamstring injury. Say this all the time, but management back in the 90s, they thought they had all of the power, not the players, not the influence of the athletes themselves and what they bring on the court, but also off the court from a marketing standpoint. Not many players better than Hakeem Olajuwon at this time. Season ends, it stinks despite them finishing with an over 500 record. He wants to get traded. Also during that time, despite winning Coach of the Year in 1991, Don Chaney gets fired midway through the 91-92 season. Rudy Tomjanovich, longtime assistant, takes over. Now, in Rudy Tomjanovich's first full year in 92-93, the Rockets end up not trading Hakeem Olajuwon, and that's when things started to get better. 92-93. This team is not only a top team defensively, third in the league via rating, but offensively via rating, top 6 in the league. They were coming from everybody at that point. This Rockets team, like I said, for the most part, always able to remain in somewhat contention. Here we go in 1992-1993. Hakeem Olajuwon wins Defensive Player of the Year. Fantastic defender. Didn't really get faked out too much. Just a big body who was mobile. some of these big guys from the late 80s and early 90s, they were more on the slow side. Hakeem Olajuwon had great conditioning. That was what was awesome about Olajuwon, what made him hard to stop. Now, in the first round, 1992, 1993, the Rockets run into a little bit of trouble. They win 55 games. They're the second seed in the Western Conference. They run into trouble against the Los Angeles Clippers, who, if you remember the Los Angeles Clippers, scratch that. You don't remember the Los Angeles Clippers because they didn't really do too much in the 90s, let alone that mid-90s area. They had guys like Danny Manning, Ron Harper, Mark Jackson, and they pushed Houston to the limit that year, which was a little surprising. But Houston was able to prevail. And then they lose in 7 to the Seattle Supersonics in the second round. Ricky Pierce hits a very clutch shot to bring the game 7 into overtime. And then Seattle ends up advancing to the Western Conference Finals. But Houston picked up someone really big that year, and his name is Robert Horry. Big shot Rob. Multiple championships with multiple teams for good reason. He was just that darn good. And he hit a bunch of clutch shots throughout his career. And now Houston has him to help out. And it's great because as you're seeing Kenny Smith and you're seeing Robert Horry really come into their own as shooters, guys like Sleepy Floyd and even Vernon Maxwell can take a little bit more of a back seat to these guys. A great combination of youth and veteran leadership on this team. Now we move to 93-94, a big 58-win season, still second in the Western Conference to the Seattle Supersonics, who end up losing in the first round of the playoffs, upset by the Denver Nuggets. Check out previous Hoops Freak Fensty episodes here on YouTube. But this Houston Rockets team is the 2 seed. They were good to go. They got another scorer and decent defender in Mario Elie. They draft Sam Cassell, which was huge. This team was deep at this point. Hakeem Olajuwon, Kenny Smith, Mario Elie, Otis Thorpe. They've got so many guys on the team. Carl Herrera putting in nice blue-collar style work, doing a lot of the dirty work, getting Hakeem out of that physical danger under the basket at times. They just had a combination of great talent. Vernon Maxwell still on the team, hitting threes, grabbing steals, hitting shots, grabbing steals. They go to the playoffs. They get through Portland. They lose the first 2 games in the second round to Phoenix, who ended up going to the NBA Finals the previous year. They end up winning the series in 7. They beat the Jazz, which back at that time, you had Karl Malone and John Stockton versus Hakeem Olajuwon. That right there is appointment TV. And they go to the NBA Finals. Now, Hakeem Olajuwon is having the year of a lifetime. We're talking about the MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, this guy had it all in 1994. And what was great about this time was that Michael Jordan, who was the most popular player in the league, he was retired. So it gave chances to other players to be that top dog, to be that poster board player of, hey, kids, look up to this player. It benefited a lot of teams too because more teams became in focus, and Houston was one of the biggest beneficiaries because of that. They go to the 1994 NBA Finals. Patrick Ewing versus Hakeem Olajuwon. You talk about centers dominating college in the mid-'80s. Now they're meeting in the mid-'90s in the NBA Finals. And you're seeing rookies like Sam Cassell be very, very clutch. Sam Cassell in Game 3 hit the game winner that iced the game for Houston as Houston and the Knicks were trading games. The Knicks end up winning Game 5 at home in the 2-3-2 format. They win Game 5. And by the way, Game 5 was also the series with the big O.J. Simpson White Ford Bronco car chase. And they actually cut away from the game at one point to show the car chase. I remember being about 7 years old watching the NBA Finals with my father, and he's getting pissed because they're going away from the game. And not only are they going away from the game, but different stations' signals are starting to interfere with the broadcast. There's a nice 30 for 30 about it. I believe it's called June 17th, 1994, from the first season of the ESPN 30 for 30s. Just absolutely amazing seeing the split screen of Game 5 of the NBA Finals in a tied series. And then the other side of the screen is showing O.J. Simpson getting chased by about 7 or 8 cop cars. Just absolutely intriguing stuff right here. Knicks win the game. They go up 3-2. They go back to Houston. And again, a great series between these two teams. But the Knicks had shooters. And John Starks was hot as hell in Game 6. Knicks trying to close out the series. At the end of the game, John Starks sitting there with 27 points. Gets the ball. Gets a good look at the rim for beyond the arc, and Hakeem Olajuwon jets out to the arc to contest the shot, and his fingertips end up getting a piece of John Stark's shot that would have ended the series potentially. They end up escaping Houston because Olajuwon blocked the John Starks 3 to win Game 6. And then in Game 7, we all know the deal. For those that know a lot about mid-90s basketball in the finals, John Starks ends up going 2 for 18, ice cold, and the Rockets end up winning a gritty game by 6 points for their first NBA championship. Hakeem Olajuwon, your finals MVP. MVP for the regular season. Finals MVP. An all-star, defensive player of the year. Talk about a career year. Talk about just an amazing year in someone's life. 1994, Hakeem Olajuwon, Michael Jordan going to play baseball at this point. How can it get any better than that? Seriously. We're talking about Hakeem Olajuwon, who, by the way, not only was a great two-way player, but he had a move called the Dream Shake. And what that Dream Shake was he gets the ball in the post and immediately jump stop so he can turn and face his opponent. That's probably back to the basket at this point. Then he uses his pivot foot to fake a couple of times like he's going one way with his momentum and then flips it up and goes the other way. He even faked out David Robinson one time in 1995, faked him out 2 different times to get an up and under move. That was the Dream Shake. It was, you think he's going one way, and then he uses his momentum to force himself the other way, not giving up his pivot foot in the process, so it's a travel and getting to the basket. So in fast motion right here in my bootleg version of the Dream Shake, gets the ball, immediately goes up, jump stops, gets on the pivot foot, and then fakes, and then goes the other way with his dominant hand. That's what the Dream Shake was, and it got everybody, even the best defensive centers out there. Can it get any better for the Houston Rockets? Well, in the 1994-1995 season, things started to change, and they still won 47 games. But mid-season, Houston makes a trade. They're having problems with Vernon Maxwell. Vernon Maxwell is getting in altercations with fans that year, and there was definitely a problem. And this Rockets management did not think that they could repeat, did not think they can compete like they did a year before. Don't understand why they thought that, but they just did. I mean, we're talking about a team that's still 7th in offense and 12th in defense. And what they do is they make a stunning mid-season trade, trading fan favorite and all-star, a double-double guy in Otis Thorpe, and they get back from Portland, Clyde the Glide Drexler. He and Olajuwon played college in Houston. Now they're playing for the Rockets together. How does this even happen? How? Clyde Drexler, one of the greatest of all time, Blazers guy, now a part of the Houston Rockets? What? And despite that, they go 500 the rest of the year, even with Clyde Drexler, which is shocking. It's not like Clyde Drexler was in the final year of his career. He still had a few good years left to go. But they end up as the 6th seed with 47 wins. They beat Utah 3-2 in the first round. And because Vernon Maxwell is now pissed at the Rockets for trading for Clyde Drexler, who's taking his minutes and certainly his shots, he literally quits on the team during the series. You don't really hear about that too much anymore happening. You hear about other ridiculous stuff in sports, but he quits on his team as a defending champion in the playoffs. Who does that? Whose ego is really that big? Stupid. That's a stupid move from Vernon Maxwell. They go to the second round. They face Phoenix. Phoenix goes up 3-1 on them. And then Hakeem Olajuwon hits a clutch shot to force OT in game 5. And then in game 7, Mario Elie hits a big-time 3 to put the game and the series in Houston's hands. And as he's hitting this 3, he turns to Phoenix's bench and gives him a little what's called the kiss of death, and that's known as the kiss of death 3. And by the way, we started to see things happen from some of the other players in that series. Robert Horry, Big Shot Rob, started hitting some big shots. Also in the Western Conference Finals that year, before game 1, David Robinson was presented with the MVP. And Hakeem didn't like that too much, took exception to it. They end up beating San Antonio 4-2, and as a 6th seed, go to the NBA Finals. In the NBA Finals, they end up facing a very young Orlando Magic team. And in game 1 of the Finals against the Orlando Magic, first, the Magic jumped off out of the gate, completely dominating Houston, scoring, flying down the court, and Houston couldn't do anything about it. Shaq was too quick. But then all of a sudden, once the second half started, Houston and their veteran leadership started to realize how to slow down Orlando for a bit, take them out of rhythm, coming all the way back in game 1. Nick Anderson has a chance at the free throw line. He's got to hit one free throw with the Magic up 3 in game 1. One free throw. Magic were also home, by the way. And he misses 4 straight free throws. Can't ice the game. Kenny Smith gets the ball, hits a clutch 3 to force overtime. And then in overtime, Clyde Drexler's driving to the basket with 2 guys on him, and he flips the ball up to the rim, bounces off the rim, and Hakeem Olajuwon, boom, tips it right back in with 0.3 of a second to go. And the Rockets end up escaping, winning game 1, and also winning the series in 4. 4-0. Houston, as a 6th seed, wins the NBA championship. And Rudy Tomjanovich with the amazing quote, to all those non-believers, don't ever underestimate the heart of a champion. Houston wins their 2nd straight NBA championship. Hakeem Olajuwon, another finals MVP. He's won an MVP. He's won 2 finals MVPs. He's won 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Multi-time All-Star. Just an amazing center. And thank goodness Houston ended up not trading him prior to the 92-93 season. And they did the right thing afterwards, by the way, because he almost won MVP in 93, and they gave him that contract extension that kept him in Houston. So now Houston's won 2 straight titles. Clutch City, in between the Bulls three-peat. It's the Houston Rockets. But then things fell apart. 1995, 1996. And it starts in a very interesting way. Because things can't get any better, right? Why don't you take the familiarity away from the team a little bit? And that's what the Rockets did. The Rockets end up changing their logo prior to the season. Their logo, their jersey styles. You go from this piece right here to this right here. This became their road jerseys. And as you can see by this card, the logo, now you're seeing a rocket there. It's not the same gold and red anymore like we had. So a little bit of a change right there. Kind of weird, though. Just saying, a little bit weird. Houston's defense drops a little bit. Their offense drops off a little bit, too. Clyde Drexler is banged up, and he's limited to about 50 games. Sam Cassell and Mario Elie also limited because of injuries, too. But they still end up as the 5th seeded Houston Rockets defending NBA champions. Remember, they won the title as a 6th seed. No 6th seed since or even lower seed has won an NBA championship. They beat the Lakers, who were kind of on the rise, though Magic Johnson came out of retirement. They beat them in the first round 3-1 in the 1996 playoffs. And then the Seattle Supersonics, who eliminated them in the postseason before, they sweep Houston in 1996. And that ends the Houston Rockets title defense after 2 NBA championships. The Sonics will go on to face the Bulls. They lose to the Bulls, but the Rockets during that time, one of the most dominant teams in the NBA. And that is where this portion of the Rockets end, because what happens in the next chapter of Houston, I'll just show you. Boom, this guy. And for those that can't see, Charles Barkley is where that chapter starts. This Houston Rockets team had it all. Offense, defense, veterans. You got to see Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon, both these guys all-stars, playing together. You got to see them as a 6th seed go all the way and win an NBA championship, which just shows how great this team was coached, how great of depth this team had, and how amazing Hakeem Olajuwon truly was. I'm Justin Fensterman. Make sure you catch previous episodes of Hoops Freak Fensty here on YouTube, telling the greatest stories of the 1990s, because that's what made the NBA as great as it is today. Thanks to AB, Adam Bernard, for hanging with me, and all of you out there, all you Hoops Freaks. See you freaks later.